When I think about SCP's values and living them with unapologetic boldness, I think the first word that comes to mind is courage.
I think my first word would probably be intentionality.
I would say, I think, liberatory.
I would say justice and courage.
Dreaming and hope are the two that come to mind.
Healing and justice.
Thought leadership and radical action.
Courage and humility.
I'm going to say liberation and healing, specifically racial healing, deep racial healing.
I guess liberating and consistent.
Social justice warrior and authenticity.
Living transformationally.
Critical consciousness, a sense of being tuned in, aware.
Walking the talk.
I think SCP over the past couple of years, several years actually, has really been focused on moving towards being a more anti-racist, anti-oppressive, more liberatory counseling psychology. And one of the things that we've tried to do this year is to really look at what our values are and where they come from.
Well, one of the things I have to say is I'm really very proud to be a member of SCP at this particular time, because starting with Annalise Singh to Mary O'Reilly to Amy Reynolds and Siobhan Moore Laban, that they've really put on the agenda, let's tackle anti-Black racism and white supremacy. And that's really hard because first of all, you have to name it.
The wording of our values sometimes and the vagueness of the way that we describe things like diversity or social justice can be really non-specific in terms of what it is that we're standing for and what we're standing against. And so then we're not really specific in what we're working toward.
The thing that stands out the most to me is the commitment to addressing anti-Blackness, anti-Black racism. And it stands out because it's something that I experienced the whole time I was interacting with not just Division 17, but the entirety of APA. As a Black person, as a Black scholar, as a Black man, I found myself regularly having to navigate microaggressions and racism and just not being seen throughout my experience as a psychologist and a psychologist in training.
A part of what's been trying to unfold over the course of the past few years is really about how do we tell the truth about how it is that the society, like our larger society, right, the Society of Counseling Psychology, like the larger world, has vestiges, really strong vestiges of anti-Blackness that have to be addressed. And truth telling is the first step.
We learn what the counseling psychology values are early in every counseling psychology program, right? And so when we go to redefine those and we center anti-racism in doing that, then that becomes what we teach incoming students about what it means to be a counseling psychologist.
That's really how I would like to see the division redefine SCP values, is not to get rid of everything that has brought us together, but to say maybe there are some ways in which the way we have defined them is actually protecting a system of power and of supremacy that we want to dismantle. And so let's redefine them in a way that makes that really clear, that we are doing some dismantling here.
Also, I think the recent consultation with Jernigan and Associates has helped us look at, kind of do a deep dive at our own, the way we work together, how we walk our values.
We've gotten down into specifics in changing our practices in how we do elections and how we make awards as a division. We've basically looked at every process that we engage in, every practice, and say, how can we make this more liberatory?
The attention to the difficulty of doing diversity inclusion style trainings and what it takes to do that and making sure that we're compensating for those in a different way than we're compensating for general trainings.
Going back to this past January's midwinter meeting, watching Siobhan really think about how to structure that meeting differently, such that it focused on building relational capacity amongst leaders to actually have sustained conversations about how it is that racism or whiteness or anti-Blackness might be manifesting.
So people come into SCP, again, myself included, feeling like this could be my professional home. These are people who share values like I do, who want to do the work like I do, who I respect, and who I appreciate. And yet our culture sometimes, when it is rooted in white supremacy, is maybe task-based instead of being as relationship-based, is time pressured instead of letting things unfold and take the time that is necessary. And so I think this year we've really tried to focus on, again, shifting that and having agendas that are really about building relationship and building connection, understanding each other, having discussion, getting lots of voices at the table so that it really is inclusive versus just the person with the most power doing all the speaking.
A shift in leadership really might be about how it is that we're paying attention to these relational processes that are really important for getting this work done, right? How do we build more relationships, or more effective relationships, or more, how do we deepen our relationships so that we can actually be in this work together while recognizing that there can be some hurt, there can be some harm, but if we have some deeper relationships, those relationships will survive and we can figure out how to recover as we're trying to do the work, right? That's the piece that I think that I've tried to observe, or that I feel like I've observed with regards to the shift.
And I think that truth-telling involves like active support of students, but also an active interrogation of where anti-Black racism and all the interlocking oppressions are still showing up in the texts we read, the ways we are taught that we often don't even use the H word, healing, which is weird to me. But the ways that we still feel like we have to be perfect and an expert. It's such BS. Like, I think the more you learn in counseling psychology, the more in mental health professions, the more you realize like there's no expert at all. But still so many of us are carrying that weight and that pressure, and to do things quote unquote right instead of real. And so I think SCP's role in supporting truth tellers is huge in kind of transforming the future of our profession. I think ultimately of APA and psychology in general.
I think faculty need to engage in professional development, in unlearning a lot of the things that we learned in our own training, and quite frankly, sometimes get out of the way of early career professionals and students who really have a grasp on these issues, and really create an educational environment that is more collective, two-way, and really ensures that these values, particularly these new values, are at the core of our educational project. I think that is central.
If we're talking about a liberation framework, it kind of has to go outside of some of the rules. Like it's not gonna. You don't change institutions by following institutional guidelines. You have to move those guidelines and show them for what they are.
Structurally, many of the ways that SCP operates that are sometimes problematic are rooted in the way that APA operates. And so sometimes it's hard to detach those. I think there's still more work to do there. And I think there's still folks who have trouble showing up at the table because of how our systems operate. So I'm thinking practitioners, folks of color, mothers, folks that just have a context that doesn't fit the structure of SCP and how we do governance as easily.
Well, it's difficult to remember almost 30 years of history, but I have to say that I think our society has been very adaptive to the changing needs of our society.
I've seen tremendous growth within SCP over the years. Thought leadership within SCP is staggering. SCP truly lives its values. SCP embraces the difficult conversations, even when, and especially when, clear answers are not evident.
So for example, if you look at the demographic profile of the members of our society, I think that's become much more diverse than it was almost 30 years ago. And I think that wouldn't have occurred without the active, intentional effort made by the leadership of our society.
And so I think we've almost seen a complete transformation in that context, where there are a lot of student leaders and ECP leaders very heavy in the forefront of leadership. There are a lot of leaders of color very heavy in the forefront of leadership. You still have your mid-career and late career leaders, but it doesn't feel as top heavy, I think, in the context of the leadership of SCP. And I think because of that, we have a good mix of folks who really understand what SCP has traditionally looked like, historically why SCP has done things, and folks who are willing to sort of think about a whole different way, right? Because they haven't really been steeped in this, 20 years of doing something one single way. And so I think it's been a time of innovation. I think we're seeing a lot of engagement of SCP values in different ways, in ways we haven't seen before.
The focus on different communities, underrepresented communities, bringing in different voices that Amy Reynolds brought in terms of indigenous ways, indigenous people, decolonization of curriculum is another thing that was focused on. So there's really kind of looking at anti-Blackness and the colonization and how that has impacted Division 17 and moving people to start thinking a little bit more in terms of liberation psychology.
It's been liberating for me professionally to be a part of this work, and so I'm really excited for the impact that it's already had. It's been certainly life changing for me to be inspired in this way and to be re-grounded professionally and re-grounded within SCP as well. So I feel really grateful and hope that some of the things that we've been able to do have been meaningful and will continue to be meaningful. So I just feel grateful to have been a part of this particular presidential run initiative.
I really think that when I look at the leaders who are currently in the field, it's really exciting for me to see people from all different walks of life who are here despite, whatever their circumstances, their experiences of marginalization, their experiences of privilege. Like, we're all here in this space trying to work towards this goal together. And I think there is an acknowledgement that this is maybe not where we want it to be, but we are going to work together to get it there. And so it feels like there's almost like a collectivism in the community in trying to reach those goals, which I don't always see or hear about in other spaces that, other psychology students or otherwise, but I do feel that in this space. So I think that helps me work through the moments where I'm especially like, why is this not moving faster? It's like, oh, well, there are these folks who are really trying hard for that.
Over this past year that I've been working here, we've been able to get like a lot done, it feels like, and I think that it kind of really speaks to the power of the collective. Like, if we all get together with a shared goal, like, there's great things that we can do. And I think I've always heard about that, but never really been a part of it in this way. So I think that is one of my largest takeaways from this past year as a GA, that we can do so much when we come together. And I think being on the ground with SCP has really taught me that.